Welcome to Matterley Basin for the 60th Motocross of Nations, the Motocross des Nations, the world-famous World Team Motocross Championship. We're just alongside Winchester, off the M3 to the east of Winchester, right alongside the A31. And there are 40,000 fans enjoying some glorious weather here on a beautiful late summer Sunday afternoon in Great Britain. Terrible weather earlier on, 4:30 in the morning through till about 7:30. Absolutely mind-boggling storms. Apocalyptic storms struck the place, but everybody survived. What's more important, the 1,640-metre track designed by Johnny Douglas Hamilton has survived. We're back at the scene of the British Motocross Grand Prix that saw Stefan Everts on the way to one of his 101 career Grand Prix wins earlier in the year. But the people who qualified top are the United States of America. James Stewart and Ryan Villopoto both going 1-1 in their respective races during their qualifying races yesterday. Stewart beating Stefan Everts and Billy McKenzie. Billy Mack on a 450cc Yamaha, riding for Great Britain in the MX1 class, and finishing ahead of Josh Coppins, Tanel Leok and Max Nagel. In the MX2 class, Villopoto got the better of a feisty duel with the newly crowned MX2 world champion, and that was at number 2, Christophe Pourcel. There is the number 2 machine of Ryan Villopoto, the man who has just taken the lights, as they call it, the MX2 AMA National Championship in the States for the Monster Energy Drink Pro Circuit Kawasaki team. Villopoto, as I said, took that MX2 race victory in qualifying yesterday ahead of Pourcel, Antonio Cairoli, Ben Townley making his return to Europe for New Zealand, Tyler Rattray for South Africa, Kevin Strybos for Belgium, and Tommy Searle for Great Britain ahead of Australian Brett Metcalf. What a absolutely illuminating cast of characters. I'm Jack Bernicle, and I'm as on the edge of my seat as you doubtless are at home to see what happens here. Incidentally, the open qualifying race went to Belgian Steve Ramon ahead of Ivan Tedesco, late replacement for Ricky Carmichael, who found that the shoulder he dislocated at Glen Helen a fortnight ago wasn't up to racing when he tried it out on Tuesday. So he's out, Tedesco's in, his teammate of course with the Makita Suzuki team in the USA. But the first race brings together the MX1 and MX2 guys. And the whole job will be so critical, especially for those 250Fs. But it's the supremely confident Stefan Everts riding an unlikely number 7 for Belgium, who emerges through the fast left turn in the lead in this beautiful English sunshine. Everts gets the gate that he wanted on the 450 Rinaldi Yamaha. So Everts takes the lead. Number 4 well in there is Sebastian Pourcel, but down already we've got number 14, Tommy Searle. Tommy Searle is down. Oh, and the new superstar of Great Britain looks to be out already. And there is number 4, Pourcel down. And number 38, one of the Italians, that's Antonio Cairoli, the ex-world MX2 champion. So 2 of the 3, in fact, of the leading teams already in terrible trouble at the start of the very first race. Tommy Searle looks as if he may have been hurt as he went down on the Molson Kawasaki, the MX2 runner for Great Britain. Italian Antonio Cairoli, the team leader for the Italians, the 2005 World MX2 champion, has gone down. But this man, number 1, James Stewart, gets a terrific start. So James Stewart, who fought right the way through the season with Ricky Carmichael for honours in the AMA National Championships, but had some lurid crashes along the way, absolutely massive ones, and one of them coming out of Gravity Cavity at the fabled Unadilla Valley Raceway, upstate New York. Out of Gravity Cavity past the famous commentary tower, he had a mighty crash, so he's really pretty lucky to be in one piece. Poor Carmichael, not so fortunate. He was chasing James Stewart when he went down at Glen Helen 2 weeks ago. Oh, and already Stewart looking a bit edgy. The first African-American to win any motorsports championship, James Stewart. AMA Rookie of the Year. The 20-year-old from Haines City, Florida, won that AMA Rookie of the Year title in 2002, his first year as a professional rider. And he and Stefan Everts have just taken off at the front, with Villopoto getting a good start as well. He's in third place, so already the Americans looking like really class acts here. We knew that they would be. We thought that Ricky Carmichael's absence, although Carmichael is here to cheer on his team, we thought that Carmichael's absence might affect their chances. But look at this, 30 minutes plus 2 laps. We have 3 of these electrifying races today. This is MX1 versus MX2. Then we have the open class versus MX2. And then MX1 versus the open class. Most of the open class, right, oh, and there goes Stewart down in exactly the same place as Steve Bomber Ramon went down. Oh, and he gets in the way of his teammate. In exactly the same place as Ramon decked Dick, but not quite as uncomfortably. He's struggling to restart. So there are Floridian, here he goes. He just flicks a tear off and then momentarily loses his concentration, misses the rut that he needed to get that front wheel in right behind Everts, and Stewart goes down. But at least it looked a fairly easy launch off. He looks fairly comfortable. Meanwhile, fighting their way through, there's number 29, Carlos Campano of Spain. There are such good riders right the way down the track. That was a glimpse of Neville Bradshaw, who stood in at the last moment for Gareth Swanpole. Molson's Kawasaki's Gareth Swanpole, of course, suffering a bad dislocation of his shoulder in a multiple pile-up at the final round of the British Championships at Hawkston Park. Now, Stefan Everts, well, he said he wanted to lead Belgium to victory to top off his magnificent career. But he's got this lad to contend with, Ryan Villopoto, the astonishing 18-year-old from Washington. Number 5 there in chasing him, Christophe Pourcel. And Pourcel was so anxious to deal with Villopoto. He beat him when they were both racing 80cc bikes a couple of years ago in the States. But now the 18-year-old Villopoto there, reigning US champ, being pursued by the 17-year-old reigning world MX2 champion, Christophe Pourcel of France. This is fascinating stuff. So the Americans are going to be very, very much on the case here, whether we've got no Ricky Carmichael or not. And there is the 63-year-old Roger Da Costa, 5 times world champion, an absolute legend in the States, 4 times winner of the Trans Am Championship over there. And when he finished his racing career, which he spent all his years with CZ and Suzuki until his final year in 1980, he went to America to work for Honda USA. And he was the man who brought over the first, oh, and we got another man down, number 105. And that's Kenneth Gunderson of Norway, not where Kenneth wanted to be. As we catch up again with the remounted James Stewart. Stewart having to make his way back through the pack as we keep an eye on Christophe Pourcel in his attempts to close the gap. He's arrowed his way through now, past the number 11 machine of Ben Townley. So Ben Townley was in the way, his predecessor by 2 years as world MX2 champion. Ben Townley, of course, I'm not used to seeing him on a Kawasaki. He's riding for the Monster Energy Drink Pro Circuit Kawasaki team, and more importantly today for New Zealand. But he's been passed into third place. Townley there, the 21-year-old from New Zealand, now living in Tallahassee in Florida. BT has been injured most of the year, but when he did manage a couple of one-off rides in the AMA Outdoor MX Light Championship, their MX2, he managed to finish on the rostrum. One of those rostrums where he was 3rd overall at Redbud. And he's certainly very happy to be back here. He was actually at the final round of the World Championships a week ago, cheering on his great mate, Josh Coppins. Josh, of course, eventually 7th in that series after missing the first half of the year. Oh, look at Villopoto catching the Yamaha as he lands off the tabletop. And these two kids, this is nothing. This is to do with personal pride as much as it's to do with national fervour. Frenchman Christophe Pourcel. The French, of course, fought a hard battle with the USA at Ernay in France last year and came off second best. A little unluckily, actually, because it took the brilliant Sebastian Tortelli to be downed by Ivan Tedesco in the 3rd race, so that and it was important for Tortelli to get a good score. It didn't matter that Tedesco didn't. Everts, Villopoto, Pourcel, Townley. Stewart is back up in 5th place. Ahead of Coppins, David Philipparts for Italy, Max Nagel for Germany, Tyler Rattray, the first of the South Africans, Finn Antipiranen, the great Brit Billy Mackenzie on a 450 Yamaha now, and then Kevin Strybos riding the 250F Suzuki ahead of Tanel Leok, 450 Kawasaki for Estonia. Daniel Reardon for Australia, Agar Leok on the 250F bike for the Estonians, and in 19th place Martin Kohut, who of course rides for Slovakia but is out of Ireland and part of Roger McGee's Wolfsport Honda squad. Marco Dube of Canada right the way back down in 28th place, and 31st place for Brett Metcalf, who's been showing so well, of course, since he went off to the States. 6th in the AMA MX Lights Championship. And look at this comparison in styles. There is Christophe Pourcel trying to hang on to Villopoto. Just behind them, another former world champion. And then the next man into view, James Stewart, recovered from that prang. Stewart says it's really nice to be over here, but it's particularly cool landing over here for the first time and being able to wear the #1 plate. That team, of course, last year was Ricky Carmichael, Ivan Tedesco and Kevin Windham. Windham was one of the guys in the frame, but eventually the nod was given to Carmichael, this man James Stewart and Ryan Villopoto. In mid-air, Stewart glances across to his left to check out where the opposition's got to. James Bubba Stewart won the AMA 125 National Motocross Championship at his first attempt. And then in 2003 he won the 125 AMA West Supercross Championship Series. 2004 he won the 125 Eastern Supercross Region Supercross title, the 1 and the 125 National Championship, before moving up onto the 250s. Well, in this case, of course, the 450F. At first he raced the 250 two-stroke Kawasaki against the 450s until realizing that really in the end he was going to have to go onto the 4-stroke, onto the bigger, more torquey engine. And this is James Stewart, anxiously watched by Roger Da Costa. And at the moment, despite his fall, the Americans are looking good. Welcome back to Matterley Basin, and James Stewart just being a little more careful as he drops into the rut at the bottom of that incline. Stefan Everts, he is looking to lead Belgium to what would be their 15th Motocross des Nations win, which would be one behind Great Britain on 16, the USA on 16. But right now, and Stefan gets it a little bit cockeyed at the end of the whoops there, but just calmly holds on to it. Past few weeks, unusually for him, he's been resting a bit between races and letting his body relax a bit rather than hammering himself through his remorseless training routine. The immaculate, shortly to be 34-year-old. And really, look, watch this. This was a nasty moment. But calmly and without his foot ever dropping off the foot peg, he just sorts the Yamaha out. Unusual and astonishing announcement was made yesterday here. Stefan Everts is to be the race supervisor, the race director for KTM in 2007. KTM proudly made that announcement. Pit Beirer and the double world champion from Austria, Heinz Kinnegadner, introduced Stefan Everts at a especially reconvened press conference to announce that he indeed was to be their race supervisor in Europe for 2007. Now that's the gap between Villopoto here and Christophe Pourcel, and at the moment Villopoto, who they had some doubts about the sheer inexperience of. I mean, it's the first time he's come abroad. The kid only actually started racing professional motocross halfway through last year. He took in the last 4 rounds of the championship. But of course, Christophe Pourcel right there behind him is also a relatively inexperienced man. And this is James Stewart catching Ben Townley now. So BT, with very, very little actual race practice recently, only managed to do 2 AMA National Championship rounds, both times on the podium, but they weren't consecutive ones, because after injuring himself badly earlier in the year, he then did what he called a 3rd-degree separation of his shoulder, which put him out again. So he's come back off a second injury to race for New Zealand here. And the current standings, which you may well have glimpsed before I did. because I was watching this battle going on. Here comes James Stewart trying to find a way round Ben Townley. Townley, of course, gave Ricky Carmichael a huge run for his money, riding on the 450 KTM last year at Ernée. He made a huge impression on the Americans. But he hasn't made a huge impression on that American, because the Floridian, 20-year-old James Stewart on his 450 factory Kawasaki bounds past the 250F Kawasaki of Mitch Payton's Pro Circuit team, ridden by Ben Townley. And at the moment, looking very comfortable indeed, James Stewart. It was said this track, it has a feel about it of an AMA outdoor national circuit, and it was fancied that it might suit the Americans. Certainly suiting this fella. He won 3 events, of course, in his debut season in Supercross, interrupted by an arm injury at Phoenix. But he's come back strongly in 2006. 10 wins out of 18 rounds Stewart took in the Supercross series, but still lost out to Ricky Carmichael. And this is the man carrying the usual number 7 that's ridden by James Stewart. Stefan Everts, he's been 5 times a winner in the Motocross des Nations for Belgium, and he'd really love to equal that record of Roger de Costa's. He's won 6. It would make him the joint winningest Belgium. And look at the way that Villopoto gets that downhill double and drops right in to the apex of the left-handed turn. Beautiful riding from the kid. 18-year-old. A storming 2006 AMA Supercross Lights season, winning the 2006 AMA Motocross Lights Championship after a massively successful amateur career. And Pourcel is beginning to drop back a bit now, not quite able to match the sheer consistency of Villopoto's lap times. Frenchman number 5. Incidentally, you'll notice that it was, I forgot to mention, Sebastian Pourcel, originally the 21-year-old brother of this kid, selected for the squad, was then dropped in favour of Michael Pichon, and as a kind of protest, oh, and here comes Bubba Stewart. Stewart's closing that gap on the world MX2 champion. Got the extra power of that 450F underneath him, of course. Bubba Stewart was handsomely the fastest man on track yesterday when conditions were a bit kinder, with an amazing lap of 2 minutes 3.123. But of course we had 2 or 3 hours of heavy rain this morning that have made a difference. We catch up here with number 37, David Philippats, who's going into MX1 next year with KTM and is riding the MX1 450 right here. The 250F of number 11, Ben Townley, leading the New Zealand charge, with Josh Coppins a couple of places further back. So the New Zealanders are looking good. They've only ever been on the rostrum a couple of times, you know, in this event. Talking of which, Belgium have been on the rostrum 49 times out of 59 runnings of the event. So they are looking for a 50th podium, and of course you know which step they'd like to be on. But unfortunately, Kevin Strybos, racing the 250F rather than his customary 450F Suzuki, is seemingly able to make ground. He's lying about 12th at the moment. Strybos not able to close down anybody in front of him and therefore help out his teammate Stefan Everts, who's leading handsomely. Townley has Josh Coppins a couple of places behind him, so New Zealand looking tidy. Townley in 5th place, Philippats leading the Italian charge with poor Caroli way downfield. But Caroli's making terrific progress. The Italians could get back into it. Coppins, the second of the New Zealanders. Rattray, the first of the South Africans. Mackenzie still looking solid in 10th place, but really dropping well off the pace of Max Nagel. And Cairoli's up to 13th. Terrific performance by him. He's stormed past Antti Pyränen and Agar Leok. Daniel Riordan's dropped back on the Australian big bike rider, just ahead of Nev Bradshaw and Carlos Campano. Bradshaw, of course, on the 450F Motorvision Suzuki, riding for South Africa, alongside Tyler Rattray and Wyatt Avis. Ryan Villopoto had a huge set-to with Mike Alessi. Alessi just charged away into the lead of the American AMA Lights division. And it looked like he was going to take the championship cleanly for Red Bull KTM, but then he said he actually got a bit stressed being in the lead. He didn't much. It was actually quite a relief to him when this guy came back at him and grabbed successive victories at Budds Creek, High Point, Budds Creek, Red Bud and Unadilla Valley Raceway, all tracks he'd never seen before, and put himself back into the lead. But then he had a breakdown at his home track at Washougal. That Mitch Payton tuned 250F Kawasaki broke down on him. Made no odds. He came back to take the championship anyway. We're now looking for the second of those, and here's the battle going on. There's that Kevin Strybos being passed by Tanel Leok, number 16. So Strybos normally expects to have the 450 Suzuki underneath him, and he's just had the De Groot Kawasaki 450 of Tanel Leok. The Estonian Express charged past him. So rather than gaining ground, at the moment, Kevin Strybos, the 21-year-old from Giel in Belgium, is losing ground. Belgium still in a pretty good position, but not good enough. Look at that, the USA with a handsome 6-point lead over Belgium and New Zealand. Italy are now fourth, thanks to the progress of Tony Cairoli after that mess earlier on. And France in 7th, 8th for Finland, 9th Australia. Don't forget, in the end, the results are counted best 5 out of 6. So you can throw away one dire score. And at the moment, of course, Great Britain are at the bottom of the pile because they've lost Tommy Searle. Now the question is Tommy going to be fit to ride the second race? Because if they're without him, then that's it. Their chances are absolutely gone. And there was so much hope that the young British guys, the 17-year-old Tommy Searle, 22-year-old Billy McKenzie, and the guy who's just retained his MX2 British Championship, who would be out on the 450 KTM in the next race, Carl Nunn, would have a real chance of a podium or even an outside chance of a victory here. That was until we saw the Americans out on track yesterday and their blistering speed. This kid, Ryan Villopoto, he was the second fastest man out on track. 2 minutes 4.2 seconds was his fastest lap. Evert's fastest lap yesterday was 2 minutes 5.4. But of course, conditions are a little bit crabbier in places today after all that rain. He's just kept the dust down. Incidentally, you've got the 19 top nations out of 31 entered here. There was a B final earlier today, which was won by Cornel Nemeth of Hungary, though I don't think his team took the overall. But the B final, of course, was 12 nations who didn't manage to come through. And looking anxiously over his shoulder, Patrick Walther of Switzerland, number 44, is now in a position where the blue flags are waving, and he needs to keep out of the way because the big boys are a-coming. There's no sign, of course, of Gordon Crockard because the former, as we take a quick little glance at the standings, look at this, 9 laps in, Everts has the lead by 11.5 seconds from this kid, Ryan Villopoto. James Stewart now into 3rd place ahead of Christophe Pourcel, Ben Townley. Townley and Coppins are the guys who are keeping New Zealand very much in the fray. And Billy McKenzie in 10th place. Well, Great Britain will emerge with just those 10 points if Billy Mack can hold on to that on the Bike-It Dixon Yamaha. Bike-It and Dixon, of course, are the people who've promoted and organised this event. A huge undertaking. Just the sheer superstructure of the thing. Cairoli's still there in 13th place. Can he get any further on than that? He wouldn't put it past him. He's got Kevin Strybos and Tanel Leok and Billy McKenzie ahead of him. And Jonathan Barragan's having to fight his way through for the Spaniards. He would have been he would have been the linchpin of the Spanish team, you would have thought, but another victim of that fracas on the first lap. Everts, who had that dream finish to his career with his 101 Grand Prix, no sign of a Dalmatian, but 101 Grand Prix victories at Ernay in France. And there is the man whose records he beat, 63-year-old Joel Robert, 6 times World 250cc motocross champion, 50 times a Grand Prix winner, one of the great beer-swilling, cigarette-smoking heroes of 1960s and early 70s motocross, and the man who inspired this guy, Stefan Everts, when he was a kid. Joel Robert is the Belgian team manager. He looked fairly resigned to things, didn't he, at the moment? There he is on the left-hand side. He was a wizard. When he was a 20-year-old riding for CZ, 1964, he won the first. He was the youngest ever world champion at that time. And look how difficult it is for the guys who are about to be lapped. You realise just how tricky it is. Now, Stefan Everts doesn't much care for people getting his way, does he? That's Yohei Kojima of Japan. The Japanese doing well to qualify. We welcome back Akira Narita, who was, of course, rode a season or two stateside. And, of course, the absolutely lovable Yoshi Atsuta, who came over as a 24-year-old double champion from Japan, and is at the presently leading that championship by 3 points, actually, back in Japan, from Akira Narita. There's a terrific battle going on between two of the members of the Japan squad back home. And incidentally, their manager, get this, Tetsumi Mitsuasu, a little guy who's now supervisor of Yamaha's racing program in Japan, as the stars and stripes fly for this guy, Ryan Filipotto, and the man behind him, James Stewart. But Mitsuasu finished 5th in the 125cc World Championship of 1980, behind Harry Everts and Akira Watanabe. And that was for Yamaha. This is Kawasaki's second and third place men in the race, but leaders on the world team stage at the moment, Villopoto and Stewart. And Stewart looks fairly determined to get the better of Ryan Villopoto. I should think he's reckoning, well, I'm on the 450, I should really. James Stewart obviously made of India rubber, because he's had some really massive prangs in the AMA Outdoor Nationals, and he somehow bounced and survived them. Although it has to be said that when he crashed in practice at Unadilla, he never came back out to race. Both his bike and himself were far too second-hand to race that day. An almost identical balletic approach by the two lads. Roger Da Costa, though, always has that anxious look on his face. He's a lovely, lovely man. Just loves the sport and everything about it. And since 25 years it is, since 1981, when he personally got together that 4-man Honda US squad that came over and won the trophy, because there used to be 250cc and 500cc events, the trophy and Motocross de Nation in successive weekends for the States. And that was the first time they'd won it. They had finished runners-up twice in the 70s, back in 1974 with Brad Lackey and the late, lamented, recently deceased Jim Pomeroy, and again in 1977 they finished second. But it was 1981 when they started an amazing run of 13 successive victories, until the British came out of nowhere at Roggenburg in Switzerland in 1994, as we see a pile-up that I think involves two of the back markers rather than any of the front men. And it's the Japanese boy, number 35, Yohei Kojima, on his 250F Suzuki. And these two, what identical riding styles we're seeing. The two Americans showing how these deep ruts should be dealt with. James Stewart looking for those smoother lines, trying to get out of the roost of the bike ahead of him. As they lap number 56. At least I think it was number 56. But they've got through pretty smartly. And this now a battle for second place, but really the States are going to go into the clubhouse with a score of 5 for second and third places if these two lads just stay on two wheels. Well, there you are. We keep going back to number 56, and I didn't think I had a number 56 in the race, so there we are. We'll work that out some other time. Fantastic setting here. When everybody first arrived late in the week on Thursday, there was some torrential rain, and then there was a beautiful day on Saturday. Friday was wet, yesterday was lovely. And the way that the track has rutted out will quite suited the Americans yesterday. But with having had that heavy rain this morning, that has meant that Stefan Everts, having got the whole shot, of course, which is an absolutely vital commodity, has been able to tiptoe his way through ahead of these guys as Stewart goes for the inside line and then digs deep down to the outside berm, giving Villopoto the chance to turn tight. But underneath a Belgian flag, James Stewart has the power from that 450F Kawasaki to launch himself through into second place. So James Stewart moves second. The 20-year-old takes the 18-year-old. Roger Da Costa just hopes that they'll behave themselves. Da Costa, who won his very final Grand Prix, the Luxembourg Grand Prix of 1980 for Honda, before exiting Europe and heading over to the United States to work for Honda America. Now, of course, he's the head honcho at Suzuki. Ricky Carmichael is his main man, but Ivan Tedesco will be out in the next race, which will be bringing you live right on top of this one. This is the race that's just happened. It was ending as we came on air, and then the next race will bring together the Open Class boys and the MX2. So these guys, like Stefan Everts, Everts, I thought he was going down. Everts and the MX1 boys have the luxury of a rest during the afternoon, if watching your teammates can call being a rest. And then they come out to face the Open Classes at the end of the day. Stefan Everts, of course, won at Lierop. That was Steve Ramon, we caught a glimpse of them. Steve Ramon with Stefan Everts and Kevin Strybos were the winning team at Lierop on October the 2nd and 3rd, 2004. The last time that Belgium won. The Americans, of course, hadn't sent a team over that year. And that day, Belgium beat the Netherlands, France, Estonia and South Africa. The Netherlands, astonishingly, haven't qualified for this main race. Mark de Rover riding a very special 450 KTM rather than his usual 250 bike in preparation for taking over on this team, on Stefan Everts' team next year, of course, with Michele Rinaldi's Yamaha squad. He wasn't able to do enough to get his team through. Bas Verhoeven and George Strick were way out of time, and that meant that the Netherlands were demoted to the B final. What an extraordinary insult to them and their team manager, the double world champion John Vandenberg. Everywhere you look, in fact, you'll see there are some intriguing people as team managers, not least of course Rob Herring, a 10-time British motocross and supercross champion, who was actually riding for Great Britain when they won that famous victory in 1994, and Robbie Herring, the man at the helm for Great Britain this time around. Stefan Everts consistently lapping, his lap times absolutely reflecting those of this man, number one, James Stewart. And Ryan Villopoto being towed along by his teammate now, so they're looking very comfortable in second and third places. I do wish we still scored this separately. We used to score it separately, so Ryan Villopoto would get a 1 point for leading the 125cc class home. That would be interesting, because the next 125 along is Christophe Pourcel in 4th place, Ben Townley 5th. How well, I beg your pardon, the 125s, the 250Fs then, the MX2s, how well are those guys shaping up against the big lads? Fantastic performance by them. So we've got 250Fs, 3rd, 4th and 5th. Then Josh Coppins, the next MX1 guy, in 6th ahead of David Philipparts and Max Nagel. And then it looks as if Billy McKenzie has dropped downfield. Billy McKenzie has dropped back to about 13th place. And Cairoli now is storming through on Kevin Strybos and Tanel Leok. So Cairoli goes top 12 with 2 laps to go. And in fact, Tanel Leok and Kevin Strybos are really feeling the heat from the Decali Yamaha of the 2005 MX2 world champion Antonio Cairoli. And of course, all this matters so much in counting up those precious points at the end of the day, because each team could drop just the 1 score. Every other matters. Everts looking for lines that steer him clear of the back markers he's amongst now. Can you imagine what it was like when China were out there in the qualifying races yesterday, getting lapped 3 times? So the very gallant Chinese squad, including Li Shi on his Honda, he was lapped. He was 3 laps down at the end of 12, for example, with a best lap of 2 minutes 56, which was about 52 seconds off the pace. They didn't look as if they were allowed to leave the ground. Look at this, 14 laps in. Philipparts, Nagel having a really good race, it has to be said. And this is Kelly with Michele Rinaldi, background left there. And Cairoli's got through. Cairoli through to 10th place. Strybos and Leoch have been trodden on by Antonio Cairoli. He's stormed through from right at the back of the field. What a great ride by the scalding little Sicilian. So he's rescuing Italy. David Philippart's on 7. That puts them on 17 points. It's still a bit of a handful, but they're better than it might have been. Mackenzie managed to restart. He's in 13th place. There wasn't only Steve Ramon in that box, incidentally. There was Marnie Bavolt, who, of course, was part of the team when the amazing Mudfest of 1998 was last in England. That's Steve Ramon. He's next out. Well, Marnie Bavolt's one of the winning team with Joel Smets and this maestro, Stefan Everts, the only man, really, who managed to get round the quagmire that was Fox Hill in 1998 after 2 days of horrendous torrential rain. The cruelest trick ever played on promoter John Haller. And we've got another man burying the nose of his bike in the trackside there, as Stefan Everts goes into his last lap. And of course, what everybody, the fans of Great Britain and everywhere else, were looking forward to was the opportunity of seeing Stefan Everts take on Ricky Carmichael, 2 outstanding competitors with 10 championships apiece, one of them in the world, one of them in the USA, who are retiring at the end of this year from full-time competition. Although you can see Stefan Everts one more time. Remember the Western Supermare Beach Race, October the 22nd, the weekend of the 21st and 22nd. But not only Stefan Everts, Tyler Rattray and Joel Smets are going to be out there. And on Saturday, Gordon Crockard, if he recovers, because Crockstar has suffered a horrendous concussion. He was taken out in a huge first-lap crash when someone landed on his back and his head on the opening lap of his qualifying race yesterday. So Ireland completely out of the tournament. And Gordon Crockard is going to put in an appearance as a sidecar passenger for charity. So go and see the Crockstar on the Saturday in the 3- and 4-wheeled race. And this guy, Stefan Everts, winner in 2004 of the Western Beach Race, will be back for his absolute swan song in the United Kingdom. Great Britain then on 13th place because they lose 40 points for a DNF. How cruel is that? So Billy Mackenzie's 13 points becomes 53 because of Tommy Searle being laid out on the first lap. Stefan Everts. It was a long time before he won a Motocross des Nations, you know, because the first Motocross des Nations that he was a part of with Dirk Gerkens, Jackie Martins, back in 1990, they finished second to who else but America. 1991, second again with Bavolts and Gerkens to the USA. 1992, second again with Georges Joubert and Monique Bavolt. But he's certainly taken the win here. Stefan Everts takes the first race victory. 1 point on the board for Belgium, but not getting the backup that he could have done with. And Joel Robert knows that there's a bit of a mountain to climb here for his team, especially as those Americans have done the deed by coming in second and third. But behind them, Christophe Pourcel hangs on to 4th place. Ben Townley and Josh Coppins gets through past David Philippart's into 6th. So Townley and Coppins, a good ride for them, for those two. That puts them strongly on 11 points in 2nd place, I think. And then Philippart 7th for Italy, Nagel 8th for Germany, but without any backup. Rattray 9th for South Africa with Nev Bradshaw 18th. Tony Cairoli in 10th place, so 17 points on the board for the Italians. Strybos 11th, 12 points on the board for Belgium. They are just behind New Zealand by 1 point. Consistency really matters in this game. Sebastian Pourcel has 15 points. Christophe Pourcel has 4, so 19 points for the French. This is really intriguing. And of course, remember, what a magnificent sight here. Matterley Basin, just outside Winchester. Brings back memories of that wonderful song, Winchester Cathedral. Stop letting me down. Well, Matterley Basin hasn't let anybody down here. What a great atmosphere. The Motocross des Nations, the Motocross of Nations, as it's now been called the last couple of years. The Americans won it last year at Ernay in France. They beat the French. They mounted 16 points. The French had 24. Belgium third with 31, ahead of New Zealand and Great Britain. But Everts takes the first victory. Stewart and Villapoto, though, are already well on the way for the USA. Italy and Belgium are still in with a shout. Great Britain, not realistically. A lot depends on whether Tommy Searle's well enough to come out for the second race, what sort of state the kid's in. The Australians consistently poor. Brett Metcalf, 20th place, and Daniel Reedon dropped back to 21st, ahead of Martin Kohut on the Wool Sport Honda. Akira Narita, a disappointing 27th, just after a spill, just ahead of his teammate Kojima. And Marco Dube, even more disappointing for the Canadians, for whom Carlton Fasciati, who's well known for retired on lap 2. Fasciati, of course, the teenager who's well known to British people who like to go and watch him at the Sheffield and other supercrosses in the UK. He'll be back on the 28th at Sheffield Arena. USA, 5 points. New Zealand 11, Belgium 12, Italy 17. In fact, we could have done with those points just on there a little longer, so we could have seen what's going to happen when we get into the next race, because of course when the next race comes along, it's going to be really crucial which points are where for the teams at the moment. That then was the first race, the second one to come.
Get my